Varaprasad Rao ji.
So I thank the chair for giving me this opportunity, sir. So we appreciate the amendments being brought into the company law, particularly with regard to the setup of company law tribunals and the appellate tribunals. It also has tried to take some initiative to protect the interest of the investors in a large scale. Similarly, try to bring in some accountability of the directors, the auditors, managerial personnel, and also try to improve the corporate governance. It also wants to help the ease of doing business, particularly for the startup companies, and to simplify some of the procedures like the private placement process, self-declarations, and also doing away with separate offer letters, and also to maintain a register of significant beneficiary owners of a company. These are all the very positive aspects, and we appreciate that, sir. But as earlier Mr. Mehta was mentioning that the law is as good as it is administered. So therefore, merely by bringing laws, it doesn't take us anywhere. The implementation has to be good, and monitoring also has to be done. So all we need is mostly of the corporate governance, particularly dealing with the banking sector as well as the corporate sector. That is totally lacking here on professional lines as far as India is concerned. We are far behind when compared to the advanced countries like European countries. So some of the things that the clauses that we have been incorporated, I am not able to appreciate that for the simple reason that a relative of an independent director could give a loan to the company or to the promoters and its satellites is definitely an unhealthy trend. I do not know why it has been considered. Many of my previous the speakers have mentioned that there is no reason why it has to be considered that. And already there is lots of nepotism is taking place, corruption is taking place, and still you want to bring down the independence of the independent directors is very unfortunate. The very logic of bringing the independent directors earlier speakers have mentioned is lost the moment you permit a relative of an independent director to give a loan to the company or to the promoters. So I thank the ministry, sir, for doing lots of consultations and forming the committees and all that before bringing up this the bill. But what is missing, because you have discussed, you have involved the RBI, SEBI, industrial bodies, the institutes of cost, chartered accountants, and company secretaries, but the real stakeholders, the investors, are totally missing. I don't think that you have mentioned anywhere where the representative of the investors, they are the real shareholders, the stakeholders and the shareholders. I don't think that anywhere any of these your documents show that you have a detail, you have a discussion with the bodies of the shareholders, which is extremely important. Perhaps what you can consider now, because as of now India doesn't have a system or a committee at the highest level to protect the interest of the shareholders. Perhaps the ministers who are here, both the ministers, very learned ministers, could consider to have a high level committee to protect the interest of the investors, particularly most of them are very small time investors, and the money belongs to them. And every time the other institutions taking up the initiatives and all that doesn't take anywhere unless we really involve these the investors and the shareholders. Sir, this one more point is the managerial remuneration. You have given a big concession, sir. Why? The reason is earlier, beyond a stipulated limit, the proposal is supposed to come to the government of India. But now you are removing that also. I'll give a classic example that we have it, sir. I am not prejudiced, I am not talking politics here. The Reliance Industries company, which exploits in a positive sense, not the negative one, the oil and the gas. And whatever the pricing policy, is giving enormous profits to that. So we see that the profit in crores and crores and lakhs of crores. And we all know the house constructed by the owners of the Reliance Industries. I don't think anywhere you have parallel in the entire world. And crores of money has been spent on the construction of his own house. We don't deny it, sir, but the point is he has exploited the natural resources which belongs to the state and the country and belongs to the poor people. So therefore, I am of the very strong opinion that the managerial remuneration beyond a stipulated limit should be with the government, because the money belongs to the people and the land belongs to the people, and these are the national interests. So therefore, just like that allowing, because as we see it, sir, 1% of the people now in India are now owning 60% of the interest by way of the national wealth. See this irony, sir. So unless you take this kind of steps, that gap between the rich and the poor can never be filled up. So I see that. I request the Honorable Minister, please give a thought to that, and managerial remuneration should be restricted beyond a point. So you have that the company law tribunals and appellate tribunals, fine, sir. But as of now, you consider that it will reduce the burden of the high courts, no doubt, sir, because the work could be transferred to these tribunals. But the point is that you have a very limited number of tribunals all over the country, and most of the states do not have it. So ultimately it will lead to this, again, pendency of the cases unless you open more. For example, some states, sir, the very highly industrialized states like the Gujarat, Maharashtra, Andhra Pradesh, and Tamil Nadu, unless you have more number of the tribunals, the company law tribunals, I don't think it will serve any purpose. And kindly relook at that issue, sir. Sir, many people have spoken in favor of the prohibition of more than 2 layers of subsidies. We appreciate, sir, perhaps it want to plug the loophole of siphoning of the money illegally. We appreciate that. The corruption also will be brought down. But one point, sir, certain industries, particularly the infrastructure companies, just can't handle without there are more number of layers of subsidies. So that aspect needs to be considered, because the infrastructure companies are extremely important, and they want to. I'm sorry, sir, very few speakers are there. Kindly bear with me, sir. Few more points, sir. So therefore, that at least for infrastructure companies it should be considered. So one more point is a buzzword in the government for the last 3 years is ease of doing business. So why are we pampering so much the industry, sir? And what did they do for the last 3 years? And why are we doing the pampering of the startup companies also to this extent? At what cost and whose cost? And terribly this the NPS, sir, this non-performed assets, for the last 3 years, if you see that, is doubled as much as that, 5 lakh crores to 10 lakh crores, and in some cases even 16 lakh crores have been mentioned. When this, the performance of the private sector banks is so good, and why these government sector banks are they lagging behind this? So therefore, ease of doing business should have some logic, because the money doesn't belong to anybody. It belongs to the poor people. Whatever the taxes paid by a poor fellow, is a sweeper, is being given here. And the money of the banks belongs to the poor people. So therefore, while ease of doing business to some extent could be encouraged, not beyond a point, and a blanket permission should not be given. Kindly relook at that issue, because I don't think last 3 years any of these companies so-called have produced any of the employment. So these things I request once again to relook at this. Say audit system, sir. They.
अब समाप्त करिए.
Last, okay, sir. Okay, okay. Sir, this corporate social responsibility. So what I request the Honorable Minister, sir, the corporate social responsibility is extremely important, sir, because unless that is done, then there is no point in it, because what I suggest is now, unless there is an act is there for the social corporate responsibility, it will not serve any purpose. For simple reasons, sir. So for small things like this, they were spending money on that. Instead of spending on smaller things, bigger things like the rural infrastructure, housing, hospital buildings, roads and all that, if it's constructed, the 2% of the companies could be better utilized than squandering it away. Thank you very much for this opportunity, sir. Thank you.
Shri Subhas